Okay, I'm standing between lunch and my talk, so I'll try not to make it too long. Maybe a bit of background on what this talk is about. I work for a company that creates apps for TV shows, and the stress that it's kind of puts on you is the fact that we create the interaction that the user does. We show the live results in the studio. The studio can moderate the results, and actually the show is changed by the actions of the user. So it's not your average, I submit something and whatever happens. It's like real life show. It only needs to work that 1 hour of the show. Before, after, there's no users. So it's like Formula One and like watching everything that goes on. So this is a bit of the context that I work in. Some of you might know that I have a background in everything on DevOps. I started the first DevOps days in Belgium, thereby coining the term. So I want to share you my mental model that I built on like how I think about DevOps when I came to the mobile space, which is only 2 years now that I entered. Lots of talks have been done on the CI pipeline. Yesterday, I'm not going to repeat that stuff. I'm kind of taking that for granted. We do automate a lot of stuff as well. We don't do as much testing because a lot of the apps actually are about finding the right interaction. It's less about, it's only after that we do the test to make it more stable. So the important part was for us to push out as much of versions we had so the customer can say, this is the correct interaction, this is what I want to have. It's not about having stability. That's something that comes after that. Okay, first part that we did is, we push it to production. That's basically what you do in your CI pipeline, put the stuff into production. Okay, and then you go live. So I'm not a coder myself, so I work with them, but I'm the guy that like babysits the show to see if everything's working. So obviously I have my live dashboard that I look at all the metrics that I get, and this is just the start of one of the shows. It's like real time, I watch if everything's okay. And I also want to see that for my app, because there's one thing to watch my backend if it works, but in real time, thanks to Fabric, I can actually see the real-time user count. Like, is my app getting downloaded? Because there's one call to action on TV, please download the app, and then poof, you want to see, are users adopting it? Is there anything happening? We do also use Google Analytics because it's kind of a better interface, but it's close to real time. And a little bit behind, we are using Amazon Mobile Analytics because that actually allows you to export that in time. The other two systems are kind of harder to export your logs and your data. So we're watching the real-time things go by. The other things that I check is on the app itself, we've instrumented that it also shows the HTTP errors from within the app, so not just on the back end. So we can see that, for example, our ads network is having an issue, or our login system, which is a third party, is having an issue. Things we wouldn't see on our back end. But thanks to, this is a New Relic plugin that we just put into the app, and we can see if any of the third parties are failing. Not something we can do about, but at least we know, and we kind of can react on that if we want. We're not using that too much, but sometimes we do monitor parts of the CPU and the memory of the stuff, but mostly that's usual during the testing, but we can do it during production if we're really hitting a problem somewhere. Okay, I got my metrics on one window open, like 5 tabs, auto-rotating, so I can just keep going, whatever is there. And the next thing I watch is everything from the logs. As you will see, we're using here log entries. We don't just send the production backend logs or the Elasticsearch logs. We're also pushing the logs directly from our Android and iOS systems themselves, so we can kind of correlate anything that happens. It's the fastest way to get the feedback. We don't want to rely on a system that only grabs the logs on errors. We see them streaming in at real time and see what's happening. Super useful, because now I can actually filter the logs and see the whole trace from backend to server and from the app by searching the username and see if someone is hitting a problem. So things we log is like a unique identifier and so on, the app URL. We basically map the views to URLs so we can kind of see the whole stream that users are clicking through into the app. This is where I get the argument with our developers that it's not about NS logs. It's basically whatever I find useful for operations, I want them to log. It's not about like your routine, but any actions that are like reaching out to you in HTTP, timeouts, all that stuff, that's the stuff I want to know in my logging. There's a simple way to kind of just log that into iOS. You can actually use ASL on iOS to like log to the device and then ship those logs directly into your logging system. So if we made a plugin that actually reads those logs, puts them into log entries, and we get all the information. Same is for Android. You can use Logcat, and then on the device, it actually pulls out the logs that we produce, and it just sends them over to our log system. Make sense so far? Okay. On a live show, you want to watch Twitter. It's the best way to get feedback because TV and Twitter, they're kind of interrelated. Facebook is kind of too slow and it's hard to find, but at least if you have a hashtag, people will start complaining on the stuff they're doing. Like a spelling mistake, okay, that's now a trivial one, but at least we get some feedback. The ratings is probably too slow, but it's one of the things you want to watch, especially on over multiple shows, like what the users are actually doing. It's not anything specific for that, but as a support engineer, you want to watch the ratings in case 5 times I say the app crashes or something, and you're not seeing anything, your metrics or your logs, you're watching these ratings go by. We kind of automated the App Store reviews process, so whenever somebody puts on a review, it gets into our Slack system, so we don't have to watch out and look for the things all the time. Mentioned before by the first talk by David, like we have a help channel. Just send email if you're having a problem or whatever. Super useful because people use that. They're trying to complain. Before we didn't have that. People just went into the App Store. We didn't have any contact, whatever. And now at least they're sending us an email and we kind of get the feedback better and with context. Because what you do is like, okay, it opens up a ticket. It sends off the log report at around the period the ticket was sent. And you get extra information about everything the user of their context. So at least you get more than just the message on the App Store where it doesn't indicate what device, whatever. Even the user can be fake, no correlation, but this is the way how we get the information out. And if we're really, we have some time to kill, then we go into conversation with our users and we actually chat because, mail or message just takes too long. So if we can really chat with them, if we're hitting a problem, at least we have a good feedback channel to get that from the user. One of the things that I stress for our developers is that we want to have a notification system in case we do see a problem. Like a few of the earlier talks, the fact that we can just put up a pop-up saying, you need to do this, we're aware of this, in a live show, at least you can kind of tell people, there's this problem, we're aware of that, stop complaining, or this is the workaround, or something you do. So we just try to go faster and apply everything we were doing for the web, but now for mobile apps. But it does require that you kind of prepare these things ahead into your app. Same thing for a support fact. If you kind of know you have known issues from your tests and the kind of flaky things which we couldn't solve because on TV the deadline is set and we can never move that deadline because it's programmed, whatever we do. So we do fill that up into your support fact so people at least can look there if it's a known issue and kind of figure out a workaround if they have to. Mentioned before, the review prompts is kind of important. If we give them good support, then we ask them for a review, and kind of bump the ratings in a nice way. It's really helped us to do that, to get better ratings, at least immediately right after the show. Sometimes you get these errors coming in, and you have your OCI testing and going to real devices and whatever, and still you're hitting problems. We use sometimes like Keynote. If we can find the device that they're complaining about of having an issue, at least we can manually try things. It's not an automated device farm, but it's like manual experimentation to see what's the problem on this device and like what's happening here. Things like a Samsung that has a jar file in front of the class pod and it's overwritten any of the other classes you include, stuff like that. You can't really figure that out up front until you hit those problems, and then you try to check that. Over multiple shows, we upgrade it, but it's also important that for the next show, they actually get the new version, which is improved. We can't wait for them to slowly adopt and go on. So we kind of, we push them the fact that there's an update. We don't wait for the auto-updating. I don't know if how it's here in the US, but we noticed that in Europe, people disable the auto-updates because the data plans are not good, and then the auto-updating doesn't work that well. So we really have to kind of almost push them or nicely ask to get into a new version. It really helps if you have a new feature and you kind of, if you want to participate in the next show, this is the new feature you can do, please upgrade, and then we kind of get the people so far. So this is what our Slack channel looks at. So our build system, our deployment system, but on the same time, our monitoring system, the iStore review system, the logs that are coming in, the crashes that are coming in. So this is like immediately into our like support channel when we do the live support. So we get that feedback as fast as we can. I'm not saying everybody has to do this, but if you think about how fast can I go, even if you don't need it, the fact that you have it can save you a lot of time. So it's like stressing the boundaries of how fast and how real time can I get to do this stuff. I'm sure if any of the other big companies are doing a big launch, they want to have that as well. They want to know it's not for that 1 hour, but the fact that they want to have the feedback as fast as possible because a new release getting bad reviews, that might be killing you. This is kind of where you go. So kind of a little diagram. So if people just complain on the website, we don't have any device details. If they go into the app, we get the device details. On the App Store, we don't know anything on the complaints. With the live chat, we can point them to the frequent asked questions. And in the meanwhile, we'll just send the crash reports, the metrics, and the logging from both the backend and the app to the same system. So one of the errors we have, like if things are crashing, was it due to low memory? Were it API errors? So things we can trace back there. One of the things like we learned to improve ourselves over those 2 years, like was mentioned before, we had a debug flag we could enable for specific devices that had some issue, so at least we could get more feedback and not having to log everybody. So we kind of used feature flagging for enabling logs or the debug level, or kind of recording more parts of the session. So that's how we cope. I learned today that we don't all need that, and you can just put that on the fly, but at least this is how we learned our journey. So for me, this is kind of like I had everything, and I watched the show and so on. Okay, show's over. Okay, I want to do a new bug report. It needs to be there before the next show, before the next week. It's like close to insane, obviously, but because that would mean like another week of hitting the bugs. So what can we do about this? If you're lucky, it's 7 days, but never is, especially for you. I don't know what they do. Expedite, we found out because the customers are using the same account. They have multiple apps under the same account. The fact that one of the other teams has submitted an expedite review kind of blocks your chances of getting a new expedite review. So they don't really care, even if it's a live show, like 1 million viewers. Like, we never were able to convince any way to kind of make things better for them. So we started thinking pretty much in the same vein, like what is not code and what can we change? So everything about remote content, images and whatever, we just push that somewhere out so it's not in the app. Mentioned the feature flags. We do push things into web views because that enables us to do like faster changes in case the functionality is not used native. We kind of are able to do like updates of little parts through remote bundles and then swizzling, but I'll come back to that later. So this is like another app we built, a kids show. You know, it has videos. You can create drawings, mini games, surprises, and even HTML games included into the game. So these two parts are native. These are web, and actually this is like a 3D game, but it works through a web view, so we can update that later if we have to. So remote config, it's very easily on startup. You know, you get the new settings, you change the settings before your app, and then you get that. So no more coding all these settings into the app. We do code defaults, so when the app starts, has the defaults, but then we kind of override them with remote settings based on, you know, an API call. Anything with localization, you know, you don't really need that into your app. If you want to change that or you have typos, you really don't want to go for a new update to the app stores or push that out, keep that somewhere centrally. Also helps over Android and iOS to keep those things consistent, so move those out. UI control, something we're experimenting with you know, kind of changing stuff dynamically, has been talked before. You know, some things you can actually change on the visuals, kind of like A/B testing, but we use it to patch parts of our app to make that more flexible. Because we use web views for support, or like for small updates, web views on Android are a real pain to actually, you know, make that consistent. So we include actually the Chrome browser into our apps, so we get a consistent Chrome version, and that way we have less support about writing the HTML parts of our app. And then we use Jockey.js to actually communicate between the native part and the web part, so they kind of like a bridge, and they can exchange things like the authentication or logging or anything that we kind of built to that. So for example, the app starts with the framework I showed. You click on the mini game, it actually starts up a web view, it gets initialization parameters over this bridge, and because it gets the username that's logged in and everything that's already done native, so he doesn't have to log into the web view again, and that's kind of things we do. Even like, where are my buttons on the web view? Are they left, right? What color are there? So everything comes through that bridge. You can go further than the web view. You can use something like Phonegap as the web view. So you can actually also bridge native code into your web view. And this looks promising, although we're getting kind of on the edge of, you know, what we know will Apple approve or not approve. But you know, that's whatever you do. So just a quick example of like a bundle for a storyboard. You can actually remotely update your storyboards as long as you don't change any of the actions, iActions. You can just re-download it from a zip, unzip it on your device, load a new storyboard, and actually have that patched. So you don't have to technically go through an App Store review if you want to change a storyboard on iOS. Okay, So we kind of got our ways around to moving parts, let's say like the not code manifesto that I just heard. Like everything that we could push out over the time, we kind of did. But obviously we do have still crashes coming in. Pretty standard, crash reports coming in. The nice thing is it's also close to real time. We correlate that with the user, so we can actually see which user has used it. Then we can use that ID to go into the logging and see what they've done. So kind of the way of doing the support. And that's where we're experimenting with. Is the swizzling. We're probably not going to implement it ourselves. We're going to use a product for that. But basically what it does, dynamically, swizzling allows you to rewrite like functions on the fly. And if you combine that with a remote call, like what's my function, what do I need to do, then you're actually rewriting the code dynamically to do that. So this is the technical way that you could live patch things. And the other thing is that, communication channels, find out the users that hit a problem, send them a nice email. Can you come back? We know you hit a problem kind of proactively. Maybe when they log into the app, we have a notification that they hit a problem. So it's kind of like customer relations. And it's not because we want to sell more of the app. It's just the fact that you're kind of customer care that you say, okay, you hit this and, don't stop using these things. It could be a push notification, email, or in-app message. So we kind of now got like not just watching at the logs, but we got way more knowledge on the project side into the operations, so we can actually follow things through, but with more knowledge of the actual app. So the logs were nice, but really hard to tail if you just hit like, I did this, I did that. So we tried heap analytics, nice way of if you have your views come in on the user actions that have been done and you haven't instrumented like how your view is named, you can actually rename them within their product, and then you can like make sense of their user flow even if you didn't label every action that you did. So it's a nicer way of visualizing these things. Although for our model we can afford them, but it's a nice thing if you could do that. So if you can afford it, I think that's great for support reasons. And people also use that obviously to see like what's the user flow, like how did they go through the app and all that stuff on a user level. So not like generically like Google Analytics that says like most of 10% went to this and 10 to that. No, here you can just say, okay, what's the complete stream that the user clicked through and what he did. This is a bit scary. We've used it in like our beta testing, but not in production. It's to get an idea like where do users click to do that. But for production, like privacy reasons, kind of makes it scary that we start recording the app. Although there's kind of a few products out there that allow you to do that, actually to record the whole view in a movie, like whatever the user does for support reasons. Okay, let me see. Okay, yeah. It's tedious to watch every movie like this, obviously. So if you can scroll faster and get some cues, but it does help you to in your beta testing to get the ID. I mentioned this before. This is kind of helpful, but then it is also not because it's an average and doesn't really tell you about a specific user group that is doing a certain interaction, like the 5 to 9 year olds, or they're using it the same way as your 10 to 15 years old. So it's useful, but not that much. Even as an operational guy, I'm interested in the ranking because it might be a good indication that there's a technical problem. It might not just be that people don't like the app, it just might indicate that there's something happening with the crash. Like I think we had it once over the weekend. Somebody forgot to schedule new content in the app, so everything was hunky-dory on the monitoring, metrics, logging, no issues, with just no content. And people are like, okay, open the app, no content, done. It's like, what? Okay. This wasn't really in the rank history, but it showed kind of after a while. So yeah, things you want to keep track of. And the retention, the same thing. Most people look at the retention for like the business part, but if you start seeing a drop after a new deploy on the the retention or something, that's kind of an interesting thing. Yeah, this is because it was a big launch, and then you see it's nothing. So, and to get some of the data out from the app stores, you can use some API to get that automated into your dashboard as well. It's not that much on a real time anymore, of course, but at least it's more information that you can get. A/B testing, it's just in general. That's over multiple shows. If it's an episode that's like recurring every week, if it's a one-off, A/B testing doesn't really make sense because there's nothing you can learn about it. It's like a show like Eurosong Vision Contest or something. It's a one-time episode and that's it. So this is kind of like CI delivery, everything with metrics flowing back to here. Then once you have that feedback, start like making your app better with the instrumentation, making more domain knowledge of your projects in there. And then when you get the feedback back, here maybe you can address the feedback to the business, like are we using the right functions, getting all the metrics back to them, and that. So this is kind of how I look at the model. And this is it for me. Any questions, or you can ask me later and we can just go to lunch. Lunch, okay, thank you. Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, it's a good question. It comes up a lot. Like when I talk about our tool chain, people say like, there's so many tools out there. Like, yes, obviously I would like a tool that does everything, but I haven't found it or I can't afford it. What I found over the years is that it's become super important to be able to swap tools, even more than kind of just build the architecture and so on. The fact that we can like, if there's a new tool that does something better, can we like without paying plug it in? And that's proven to be our best like mindset. That can we change the logging system? Yes, we can just like have a little abstraction layer. Can we do the metrics? Yes, a little abstraction layer. Crash report, same thing. So we can kind of do that. Obviously, we can't do that during the 1 hour show, but we can kind of change those things. There's tools out there for the metrics, like I mentioned yesterday in the open space, is that allow you to send the metrics to them, and then you can still switch what analytics tools you want to feed the metrics in. So it's kind of those kind of level of abstractions that you start putting in to make that easier. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, once, twice. Okay. Sorry? Okay. I think I probably use my logging. Because even if I don't have metrics, I'll see things happening in the logging. And even if I don't have reviews, I kind of can see things there. So that would be my main focus. It's not the most pleasant thing, so I kind of currently use it only after the other things don't give me the good results or get me an indication more visually. But if I have to, I would go to my logs. Okay. Okay, thank you.